welcome to Scholastic Students, and today we will be looking at a video which was a debate from 14 years ago between William Lane Craig and Richard Dawkins. So we will specifically be looking at Richard Dawkins' opening statements and making some comments. So we will try to judge his arguments, look at the logic, and just comment what we think. Let's check it out.
My colleague Peter Atkins, whose works I recommend to you, I think that it's high time that a scientist won the Nobel Prize for Literature, and Peter Atkins would be my nominee for that. He was once invited to give a lecture in Windsor Castle, which, as you know, is one of the homes of the British monarch. And at the end of his lecture, Prince Philip said, "You scientists are awfully good at answering the how questions, but what about the why question?" And Peter Atkins said, "Sir, the why question is just a silly question."
Okay, so he just said he appealed to authority, and he said that why is a stupid question. So to that, I would ask why, But let's continue.
We humans are obsessed with purpose. It seems perfectly natural when we're presented with an object to say, what's it for? It starts in childhood. The psychologist Deborah Kellerman has investigated this very interestingly with children, offering them a question like, why do you think these rocks are pointy? Is it because of some geological explanation, geological cause, or is it so that animals could scratch on them when they get itchy? And below a certain age, I think it's about 6, most children answer with the teleological answer with the purpose question. Yes, they're pointy so that animals can scratch on them when they get itchy. Children then mostly grow out of that purposive way of looking at the world, but not apparently everybody.
Okay, so he's making an argument that children see the cause and is thinking about the final cause or the purpose of things, and he's just more sophisticated, so he thinks about the cause as just like the material cause, and he thinks that looking at the final cause is stupid because God doesn't exist in his worldview, so there is no purpose. So interesting.
In medieval times, I'll try to work this. Who's good with iPads? I'm trying to get... Oh, here we are. Okay. In medieval times, divines would look at living things and see purpose for human benefit in them. In the 19th century, the Reverend William Paley thought that the louse was an indispensable incentive to cleanliness. Savage beasts, according to an Elizabethan bishop, fostered human courage and provided useful training for war. Horseflies, for an 18th century writer, were created so that men should exercise their wits and industry to guard themselves against them. Lobsters were given hard shells so that before eating them we could benefit from the improving exercise of cracking their claws. Another medieval writer thought that weeds were there to benefit us. It's so good for our spirit. We have to work hard pulling them up. Now, it's not difficult to see that such people would also have found purpose in the physical world, in mountains. What's the purpose of a mountain? What's the purpose of a stream? We humans love to see purpose everywhere. And it's one of the great achievements of science, I think especially Darwin, but other scientists as well, to show that the impulse that we have to see purpose in anything doesn't work. And he did it not with the easy things like mountains. I mean, essentially any fool could see that mountains don't have a purpose. He did it with living things. And living things on the face of it have purpose written all over them. We look at a bird's wing, an engineer looks at a bird's wing, an albatross wing, say, and sees that it's perfectly designed for the particular way of flying that albatrosses have. Swifts have a different way.
So his point is that we don't have a purpose. It just seems like we have a purpose, and we look at to try to find purpose because purpose doesn't exist because God doesn't exist. So I think he's like using a kind of circular argument. He's kind of begging the question, like he says God doesn't exist, purpose seems to exist, purpose doesn't exist because God doesn't exist, and therefore also to speak about like final cause and teleological argumentation or reasoning is stupid. Let's continue.
You look at an eye, you look at a heart, you look at a kidney, everything looks designed. The Reverend William Paley himself, who was one of the earliest, one of the most coherent, I should say, advocates of this point of view.
Okay, so he's arguing against the design, I don't remember what the argument is. Intelligent design. So that because like a when you see a picture, you will think that it has like a painter, you know. And the same way with God, when we see the universe, it looks designed. Therefore, there is a designer, and that designer is God. So, and yeah, I don't know what he's trying to prove with this argument, but let's continue.
The living world as being the most important place where you can find evidence for, as he thought, a deity. Don't look at astronomy, he said, look at living things. But what Darwin did was to show that even the worst case, even the most difficult case, that's the living case, has a perfectly rational, simple explanation. You do not need to resort to the idea of a designer. That was an astonishing intellectual achievement. Something as complicated as an eye, something as complicated as a heart, even a brain. Who would have thought that by the laws of physics, unaided, unviolated, just filtered through this brilliant process of natural selection, evolution by natural selection, that the blind laws of physics could produce the illusion of design as complicated and as persuasive as we see in the living world? Well, our colleagues on the other side have probably mostly given up on the living world. That was their happy hunting ground. That was the best place for them to operate, as paley recognized. So they've been forced back now into places like the origin of the cosmos, the origin of the universe. And they like to point to the origin of the universe and say, well, science can't explain the Big Bang, or science can't explain where the laws of physics come from. Physicists are working on that. That's what scientists do.
Yeah, so he's basically arguing that evolution is correct, therefore intelligent design is wrong. And then he proceeds to say that origin, they have moved further with the question, like to the origin of the universe. But I think that was always kind of the question, like, why are we here? Like, obviously we're seeking to understand the beginning, not just the process of being here. So yeah, what caused the universe? Like, yeah, and they try to find a natural explanation. But if they have like a natural, like, if a universe began to exist, that would be really problematic for them, because then matter came into being from non-matter, which is pointing to an immaterial cause, and it was a really powerful immaterial cause. It was a timeless, if time started to exist, it was a spaceless, if space started to exist. So that seems to point to an uncaused cause, you know? So yeah, it's more like a philosophical question, and I think that we can philosophically prove that God exists. But yeah, let's continue.
They don't lie down and pathetically say, oh, we don't understand it, so God did it. Scientists actually work on the problem.
We don't understand it, so God did it. Is that how theists argue? I think that's a pretty heavy straw man, to be honest. Why did anything exist rather than nothing? Like, I think that's a pretty reasonable question. But he seems like he doesn't like the why questions. Maybe because it points to theism. Who knows?
They set to work, they roll up their sleeves, and they work on the problem. One day, physics will answer those deep questions. And even if it doesn't, even if physics doesn't answer those questions, what on earth makes you think that religion can? Thank you very much.
That was his opening statement? So if that doesn't... Wait, what was his last sentence?
Don't understand it.
Wait a minute.
They recognized. So they've been forced back now into places like the origin of the cosmos, the origin of the universe. And they like to point to the...
So they have been forced back to the origin of cosmos because they kind of lost the intelligent design argument. So, I mean, like, the standard good arguments for God doesn't use like the intelligent design. It argues from principles that are true and that are like just logical. So yeah, he's arguing against a kind of weak position, and then he strawmans the other side, and he also what was his end again?
Origin of the universe and say, well, science can't explain the Big Bang, or science can't explain where the laws of physics
Science can't explain the Big Bang. Science can't.
come from.
Okay.
Physicists are working on that. That's what scientists...
Physicists are working on that. Okay. What are they working on exactly? To explain like how something came out of nothing. I mean, it just doesn't work that way, you know?
They don't lie down and pathetically say, oh, we don't understand it, so God did it.
Yeah, that's what theists do. They just lie down and say that God did it. It was definitely not the theists that actually started doing good science. So, yeah. It sounds like he says that theists are stupid and that they are lazy. That's kind of an ad hominem attack, you know, to the man rather than to the actual question. So
scientists actually work on the problem.
Scientists actually work on the problem, and Christians can't be scientists, or I don't see the connection here.
They set to work, they roll up their sleeves, and they work on the problem.
And they sometimes turn their brain off when they say that why questions are stupid. So when they do science, what questions do they ask? Like, they can ask, like, how does this work? But they can also ask, why does this work? Why is it, like, science is always derived from, like, knowing, like, having firm causes and then finding explanations that fits with the, you know, the data. So when you're talking about causes, you know, what caused that other thing, that can also be a why question.
One day, physics will answer those deep questions.
He has a real trust and faith in those physicists, you know.
And even if it doesn't, even if physics doesn't answer those questions, what on earth makes you think that religion can?
Like, if a dog can't help you learn math, why do you think a teacher can, you know? I mean, it's so stupid. Okay.
Thank you very much.
And that was his opening statement. So how would a theist, like, respond to this? You argue against intelligent design, okay? Let's grant you that for the sake of argument, and let's just argue from the 5 ways of Thomas Aquinas that the universe, that there needs to be an uncaused cause, there needs to be an unmoved mover, there needs to be a contingent being, because if not, like, if things can exist or not exist, things would end up just not existing. Yeah, I don't know what positive case he made here for atheism. I mean, I guess it's on the Christian side to make a positive case for God's existence, but at least Richard Dawkins should have made arguments that made sense in what, like, a Christian would say, and not just what the strawman arguments that he's putting forth right now. So yeah, I don't know what more to say. If you guys enjoy this kind of content, please leave a like and subscribe, and God bless.